Thank you for joining us today on the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Emily Niebuhr. It's June 28th, 2023. You can reach us at 1-855-937-4977. You can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, or you can email us at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. So please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. So looking across hazardous weather for the states, we don't have any advisories, watches, or warnings at the moment, so a fairly calm day today. We did have a statement out, but about the Colville River, which is in north of the Brooks Range. I was concerned about high water from heavy rainfall. This was the latest gauge at Umiat. It's already peaked down this morning. It's already starting to come down. But again, just be cautious if you plan on being on the Colville River. It will continue to move, this crest will continue to move northward. So expect higher than average water over the next few days along the Colville River. Here's our latest map for fire danger. As you can tell, for grass, it's fairly low across much of the state with all of our recent precipitation all summer long, basically. So we only have a few patches where there might be some risk for drier grass, but generally across the state, conditions are fairly benign. Let's take a look at your satellite. So, you see, we have multiple weak low systems, but they're enough to be bringing widespread rain across much of the area. We have a 994 millibar low in the Alaska Peninsula. That's our strongest low right now. We also have a weak interior trough, which is causing widespread light showers across much of interior Alaska today. And meanwhile, we have a low in the towards the Kamchatka Peninsula with a weak trough. Again, fairly weak systems. We have a little bit of a ridging along the Panhandle region, but rain will moving quickly. For tonight's weather, this low continues to move slowly eastward. We have this 999 millibar low from the Alaska Peninsula, again, has moved south from its previous position and continues to slowly move southeast tonight. Meanwhile, high pressure in place along the North Arctic coast is going to be keeping stratus and fog in and out across much of the region. And then we start to see some of this rainfall push in and that ridge kind of weaken along the Panhandle region. For Thursday's weather, we are looking at, again, that low is very slow to move. It's eastward on Thursday, and then the low that was just south of Kodiak, again, doesn't move too quickly. The interior trough moves slightly to the northeast, but again, widespread light afternoon showers across much of the region and including into the Panhandle. By Friday, we start to get a 996 millibar low just south of the eastern Aleutian Islands. We start to see a ridge of high pressure finally move into the Bering Sea, creating some drier conditions across the area, but also probably some stratus and fog. Meanwhile, we continue to see fog along the North Arctic coast with that high pressure still stubbornly in place. We still have a bit of a weak troughing on Friday. That's going to continue a risk of showers in the afternoon across portions of our interior. Let's take a look at our temperatures. So our low temperatures Thursday morning, we are expecting mostly in the lower 50s to upper 40s across South Central and 44 Kodiak. Looks like we're looking at low to mid 50s up in the Panhandle. Thursday afternoon, we get up to 65 in the Golconda area, 63 near Talkeetna, and 60 in the Anchorage area. You hit some 60s in the Panhandle, but mostly in the upper 50s across the Juneau area. Friday morning, again, fairly similar temperatures with those widespread clouds and showers are going to keep things fairly consistent. So again, we have a low of 50 in the Anchorage area, and then we have lows in the 50s to lower 40s across the Panhandle. For your Friday afternoon, again, we're going to warm up to almost hitting 60 in Golconda and 65 in the Talkeetna area, 56 over in Kodiak, and we're looking at mostly upper 50s in the Panhandle area. Let's take a look at your Arctic coast. Again, underneath some of that fog, we'll be seeing Thursday morning temperatures in the mid to upper 30s and mid 30s across the Seward Peninsula and close to 60 in the interior. By Thursday afternoon, we're warming up to 78 in parts of the interior, and we're also looking at upper 40s to even a few 50s along the Arctic coast. Friday morning, again, temperatures fairly similar with that stratus in place across the Arctic coast in the mid to upper 30s. And again, in the interior, we're looking at temperatures in the 50s. Friday afternoon, we'll see some heating, but not quite as much heating as we see on Thursday. So temperatures, warmest will be about 73. But again, some nice temperatures in the 60s, almost 70 in Fairbanks for your Friday afternoon. Let's look at the Bristol Bay area. You can see the temperatures are in the upper 40s for Thursday morning, 48 near Bethel. By afternoon, again, with those low pressure systems in place, still some clouds keeping things a bit cool, but it hit close to 64 in Bethel. And we're looking in the central or eastern Aleutian Islands, looking at mid 50s across Alaska Peninsula as well. For your Friday morning, again, we're looking at temperatures in the mid-40s across most of the coastal areas especially. But by Friday afternoon, temperatures might warm up to near 65 in Bethel. And again, along more of the marine areas along the coast, we're looking at temperatures in the mid-50s. Time to look at our outlook again. July 4th through 8th, colder than normally would be expected for much of South Central, and wetter than normal July 4th through 8th.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us today on the aviation portion of this broadcast. Again, red denotes IFR conditions, which means that it's instrument flight rules, which means that it's lower visibility and lower ceilings, which are challenging for aircraft to fly in. So let's see our visibility across the state. Again, we have multiple low pressure systems in the Bering, which is going to cause widespread rain and low level clouds. So again, IFR conditions across much of the portion of the Bering. As we go up to the Arctic coast, we have high pressure in place, which is going to be causing widespread stratus and low-level clouds. Further, as we go towards the Gulf of Alaska, we can see that low-pressure system that's weakening in the area in front is going to be causing low clouds and ceilings across much of this region. As we go towards your Thursday afternoon, again, we're going to be seeing low clouds, some improvements along the coast due to some diurnal heating. But again, as we go up to the North Arctic, we are going to have some stratus and fog just off the coast as well. So be cautious in those areas. Finally, as we go to the Gulf of Alaska, we are going to see some improvements in the afternoon, but still some areas are going to be having lingering low clouds and stratus. As we go towards your Friday morning, you can tell we have widespread low-level clouds and lower visibilities across much of the Bering. Also, stratus again across much of the North Arctic coast for your Friday morning. Again, we still are going to see some improvements, but still some lingering low clouds associated with that frontal system across much of the Panhandle. Friday afternoon, we're going to be seeing widespread stratus and clouds across the Bering. We're also going to see low clouds, again, associated with that high pressure system, and some improvements across much of the Panhandle by Friday afternoon, but still on VRFR conditions, so be a little cautious. Let's take a look at all your passes across the region. Anaktuvuk Pass is going to be in VFR conditions. Aitken Pass is also going to be in VFR conditions. Lake Clark is going to start out at NVFR, but improving to VFR by the afternoon hours. Rainy Pass is going to remain in NVFR conditions throughout much of your Thursday. Windy Pass is going to be seeing VFR conditions. Isabel Pass is going to be seeing VFR conditions as well on your Thursday. Mentasta Pass is going to be remaining in VFR conditions for your Thursday as well. Tahiti is going to be having VFR conditions, but in the western part of the entrance, expect NVFR conditions Thursday. Portage is going to start out in IFR conditions. Remember that coastal stratus across much of the Gulf of Alaska, but some improvements to NVFR by the afternoon and improved conditions as you go towards the west entrance of the pass. Chilkoot and White Passes are going to be starting out at IFR conditions with improvements towards NVFR conditions by the afternoon hours. For Thursday morning, freezing levels, are going to be much higher as you go towards interior areas where that high pressure ridge is in place. We're going to see warmer temperatures, so up to 10,000 feet, 8,000 feet across much of the interior. As you go further west, we're going to see in the Bering with those low pressure systems, freezing levels of about 6,000 feet and 4,000 feet with that dissipating low pressure system. Let's take a look at your icing risk for Thursday. Again, widespread isolated moderate associated with that low pressure system dissipating in the Bering and within the Gulf of Alaska as well. But we do have considerable moderate along the coast. We also in the interior, there could be some showers developing in the afternoon, which might also cause some icing concerns. So considerable moderate in interior locations. Looking at your jet systems, again, we have a low in the Bering. We also have a low south of the Alaska Peninsula. A low level, or the upper level jet associated with that is up to 105 knots. Meanwhile, we have about 80 knots across the Alaska range for your Thursday at upper levels. As we go down to 9,000 feet, we're looking at jets that are much weaker at about 35 knots. Some lingering winds about 35 knots towards the Brooks range on Thursday. But again, fairly calm conditions at 9,000 feet. It's calmer as we get even lower at 3,000 feet. Not too many jets associated with these low pressure systems. They're weakening. So again, fairly calm conditions at 3,000 feet across much of the state with that high pressure and ridge really in control. Let's take a look at your turbulence. We have a little isolated turbulence possible along the Brooks range with that low-level jet. Also have associated with that low-pressure system in Alaska Peninsula and out into the Aleutian Islands. We do have some areas of considerable moderate turbulence.
Welcome back to a special edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, and I continue my conversation with Dr. Rick Spinrad, the administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, commonly referred to as NOAA. Dr. Spinrad, welcome back to Alaska.
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here.
What excites you most about leading NOAA?
That's an easy one, Peter. Saving the world. I mean, it sounds trite, right? But when you look at the NOAA mission, we talk about service, science, and stewardship. I like to think about our mission as being about lives, livelihoods, and lifestyles. So everything we do in the weather, in the ocean, in fisheries, in climate is really aimed at protecting people, helping build new economies, and basically making our lives better. What about that mission is not exciting? So I actually came out of retirement for this appointment because I was so excited about contributing to that incredible mission. And I really feel that if we do our job right, we will make the lives of every American better.
And can you share with our viewers, because they know the overarching NOAA term, but they don't know necessarily what agencies are involved with them. I think it would be helpful for them to understand it's beyond, say, just like the National Weather Service, which is what I am part of.
That's right, and that's a very typical kind of reaction. So I travel all over the country. Some parts of the country, people know us for the National Marine Fisheries Service, where we manage sustainably the commercially viable stocks of fisheries. As you might imagine, with 40,000 miles of coastline here in this state, fisheries is a big part of our business. The Weather Service you mentioned. We also operate the National Ocean Service, which provides all of your navigational charts. So every person who goes out on the water here in Alaska is relying on our products, not just to see the depth of the water, but also to get the predictions of waves and currents and winds offshore. And to do that, we have have a satellite and shipboard and aviation community. So we operate 16 satellites, 15 ships, and 9 aircraft. We have our own Air Force and our own Navy. And then on top of that, we have a uniformed service. We have 321 NOAA Corps officers that fly our planes, drive our ships. So it's a really broad remit. I like to think of our responsibility as being the key players for environmental intelligence for the American public and American industry and American communities.
Yeah, I was going to say, not only say people think of the Weather Service mainly as issuing forecasts and warnings, but again, NOAA as a whole, we are collecting scientific data that is essential for this country. How does that, how is that applied? Because people have to understand this goes to policy and other things for this nation.
Absolutely. So you think about how we make decisions about fishing, about agriculture, about energy, about transportation. Every decision associated with those sectors is based on understanding the environment, the weather, the climate, the ocean. And so we collect all the information, but then what do you do with it? You convert it to knowledge, and that's where all of our sophisticated models and prediction systems. So we run massive computational programs. We collect all the data. People around the country see our radars. They might see our balloon launches. They might see our airplanes. They know about our satellites, because when you turn the TV on at night, you see that image of the Gulf of Alaska that came from a satellite, most likely, that we operate. So we bring all those data into very sophisticated models and say, okay, if this is what it looks like now, based on our understanding of physics and how the winds work and how the ocean works, what will it look like tomorrow, 5 days from now? And what do we think the general pattern will be in a few months? All of that requires a lot of very detailed scientific knowledge, but also collecting information. And I might add that what's become particularly important, and I think it's particularly relevant here in Alaska, is the application and co-development of products using traditional knowledge, of which there's a lot here in Alaska. So how can we work with local communities and say, hey, what do you understand about the way the ocean behaves when it looks like this? Can we build that information, that knowledge, into our forecast system? So it's really an exciting application of state-of-the-art technology as well as taking advantage of traditional technologies, if you will.
Well, ensuring service equity is another one of NOAA's strategic goals. Can you tell us what service equity means for people living in places like remote Alaska? One of the
challenges that I would say in the past was that we would provide products and services and basically just issue them in a broadcast manner to a broad array of the population. And we've realized, whether it's in the coastal communities of Alaska, some of the inland communities, or for that matter, inner cities in the lower 48, that there are products that need to be developed specific to the needs of these communities. So we are engaging actively in a process of co-development, talking with communities. For example, over the last year, throughout the country, we've conducted 8 what we call climate and equity roundtables, where we sat down, and one of those was here in Alaska, with those communities, with native tribes, and said, what are your needs? What are your requirements? What are your capabilities? And I'm proud to share with you that as a result of that, we've begun a number of products. We'll be putting about $250,000 here in Alaska into working with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium to try to determine what the priority products are that are needed by exactly the communities you're talking about.
And not only that, I'm sure there will be a move to expand telecommunications capabilities, the infrastructure that is needed to get this information to people, especially in rural locations.
One of the exciting things about being in the Department of Commerce is that also in the department is the National Telecommunications agency, the agency that's responsible for ensuring broadband connectivity throughout the country. And I know the head of NTIA was just here in the state last week, and so we rely on, whether it's FAA or NTIA, to ensure that we have the kind of communications connectivity, especially internet connectivity, to get these products out to communities no matter where they are. So I'm excited that many of the products that we're developing right now, which are difficult to deliver to remote communities will be much easier to deliver because of these new technological capabilities for communications.
Well, that certainly sounds very promising. And finally, you have a distinguished career spanning 4 decades in science and public service. Can you briefly describe the requirements and opportunities that lie ahead for Alaska high school and college students who may consider a career with NOAA?
Well, first of all, it always shocks me when somebody says I've got a career of over 4 decades. I'd still feel like a graduate student, but that's my enthusiasm for the position and the job that we do. And I would say, I think there's, when I was going to college and graduate school, we tended to focus on particular aspects of environmental science. I want to be a biologist, or I want to be a physical oceanographer, or a meteorologist. And what we're realizing now is it's an Earth system. That if you really want to understand what's going on, you probably need a good foundation of education in the spectrum of physical, biological, geological sciences. The other thing I would say is I think it's really important to understand data sciences, not so much as becoming an IT technician, for example, but understanding how large volumes of data will be used to answer difficult questions. So some familiarity with building models, understanding how data are collected is also an important component of the job. And the third thing I'd say is, and I'm a little biased in this regard, I was trained as a traditional kind of scientist, and my plan was to be an academic scientist. And then I realized it's so important to try to communicate what we're doing to impact policy, to help the public understand the value of the science that we do, that I think every scientist should learn a little bit about the applications of their science. Doesn't mean that they have to get into the applications or become a politician, but they should spend a little bit of time understanding why the science is relevant to the world writ large. So that would be my guidance to young students right now.
Well, Dr. Spinrad, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you about the importance of these things happening with NOAA in Alaska, and I certainly thank you for your time and expertise. And those of you watching, thank you for joining us for this special edition of Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us for the marine portion of your broadcast. First, we're going to take a look at your sea ice along the North Arctic coast. As you can see, we still have a little bit of sea ice hanging on outside of Nome. We also have continued to see some erosion of the sea ice in the Chukchi Sea, and even a little bit of open water north of UAFTV. So we're definitely seeing the summer erosion of the sea ice. 5 days from now, we're expected that to continue to erode. It looks like Nome will have ice-free waters 5 days from now, and a little more erosion north of UAFTV. Looking at your marine forecast for the Panhandle area, we're seeing small craft advisory conditions, 25 knots along the Gulf Coast, especially near Yakutat, with waves of 5 to 6 feet. In interior Panhandle areas, we are seeing waves up to 3 feet and winds up to 20 knots near Ketchikan. And again, a good reminder that in some of these channel areas, waves and winds can be a little stronger, so travel with caution. By Friday, we're looking at less windy conditions. We're seeing that the winds are going to be about 10 knots. Waves are going to be about 2 feet. And along the coast, we're looking at winds of about 15 knots and waves 5 to 6 feet. Let's take a look at your North Gulf Coast. As you can see, Prince William Sound for Thursday, winds 15 knots, waves up to 3 feet. Outside those sheltered waters, you can expect waves up to about 5 feet and winds of about 10 knots. And as we go into Cook Inlet, a little windier and a little wavier than typical. So watch out for 5 feet even north of Homer and 20 knot winds, and even just outside of the Kenai, we're looking at waves still about 4 feet. So travel with caution on your Thursday. Friday, winds will be a little calmer, looking at waves at about 2 to 3 feet in the inlet, and we're looking at winds of about 10 knots. Similar conditions, about 10 knots in Prince William Sound, waves about 2 feet, and as you go outside of sheltered waters, waves about 3 to 4 feet. As we've head westward, you can see we're looking at waves about 2 feet in Bristol Bay, and near False Pass, waves of about 4 feet. South of the Alaska Peninsula, widespread 4-foot waves with winds of about 10 knots near Kodiak, outside of those sheltered areas. So fairly good conditions. Winds are going to intensify, though, as we have a new low pressure system off to the west of the Alaska Peninsula. So on Friday, expect windier conditions of about 20 knots across much of the area, waves about 3 feet, and near up to 4 feet near Kodiak Island. As we head further to our west for the Aleutian Islands on your Thursday, you can see we have about 20 to 25 knots across much of the region. Waves a little bit higher south of the Aleutian Islands. We're looking at about 7-foot waves actually ubiquitously across much of the area. We're a little more sheltered in the Bering Sea. We're looking at waves about up to, I guess the greatest is about 6 feet, but for the most part, waves 3 to 4 feet across the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. And as our low comes up, we start to see greater waves across the Bering Friday, so up to about 6 feet across much of the region, and 5 to 6 feet south of the Aleutian Islands as well. And we're seeing widespread winds of about 25 knots. As we move northward into Bristol Bay on Thursday, we're seeing waves of about 2 feet. As you go to the Pribilofs, waves up to about 3 feet, and winds generally around 10 knots. As we go into Friday, those winds and waves again are going to increase with that low moving closer to the area. We're going to see waves about 4 feet and winds about 20 knots. As we move close near to Hooper Bay, again, waves are going to be about 2 feet and 10 knots. For your Thursday, again, as we go close to the Bering Strait, winds are going to be channeled through, so expect waves of about 5 feet and winds about 20 to 25 knots. As you move further north, we're going to have generally weaker winds, but we're starting to see about 5-foot waves in some of these ice-free waters along the North Arctic coast. So be cautious of that if you're out in those areas. As we move into Friday, again, we're going to see some channeling near the Bering Strait, so about 4-foot waves again and 20 knot winds. As we move further north, again, just generally 15 knots in our ice zones.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.